Welcome to Coatings Talk Live. It's great to have you here. Now, before I open up the live stream, let me talk about the Coatings Talk Insight newsletter on LinkedIn. And if you're not a subscriber, why you should be. Subscribing to Coatings Talk Insight is a smart move for anyone in the coatings and corrosion industries. Subscribers consistently get cutting-edge information and stay ahead of the curve with the latest updates on corrosion protection, coatings technology, and best practices. The newsletter delivers valuable insights in every issue. Additionally, Coatings Talk Insight also brings you industry trends. So get a pulse on emerging trends, market demands, and regulatory changes. Whether you're a contractor, specifier, manufacturer, or support the global coatings and corrosion industries, this newsletter keeps you informed. Remember, knowledge is power, and the Coatings Talk Insight newsletter is the source of knowledge. Now let's start the live stream. Welcome to Coatings Talk. I'm Jim Kunkel. I'm a certified protective coating specialist. For the last 15 years, I've worked in and about the protective coatings industry in different capacities. Now, all of this conversation that we'll have tonight in the Coatings Talk series does not reflect the opinions or the positions of my employer, Akzo Nobel International. And joining me today on Coatings Talk is Sarah Olthof, who's a protective coating specialist as well. And Sarah, welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jim. It's great to be here.
It's very great to have you, and especially talking on the topic of active volunteering on standards development committees. This is a desperate conversation, I think, that not only you and I need to have, but also so many people that work in the protective coatings and the corrosion industries need to have, because there is a huge demand and a need for active volunteering on all fronts, on all different types of standards to really help improve quality, performance, best practices, and make our industry much, much better than what it is today. But before we get into any conversation, let's do this. Why don't you properly introduce who you are and set up really your background when it comes to being an active volunteer? I think everyone would like to know that, where you come from and what your passion is regarding standards development committees.
Yeah, so I also have worked my entire career in and around corrosion protection and protective coatings for the most part there. I managed a protective coatings laboratory for many years and have about 26 years in the industry. And throughout most of that time, probably about 20 years now, I've been active in various different standards development organizations. So I've spent a lot of time volunteering in the old SSVC and NACE. I was active during that transition period when we merged into AMP, and remain active, very active in the standards program at AMP. I'm on the standards program committee, and I'm chair of the recruitment task force for the standards program committee. In addition to my volunteering at AMP, I've also served on committees for the Research Council for Structural Connections, the RCSC, on ASTM DO1, a couple different subcommittees, and a few other places. I won't, go on with the list, but I'm really passionate about, the need for volunteers to participate and just how important the standards all these various trade organizations develop and maintain. They're so important to our industry in particular. With industrial painting, I believe. So I'm a big advocate for people to get involved.
Yeah, you definitely are. And I appreciate all the service that you've done regarding not only legacy SSPC, but in the transition with NACE and also into AMP. Being involved in a lot of these different active standards group really helps the industry, as I mentioned, too, focus on quality, performance, and best practices, but also, too, for aspects of safety, environmental protection, and also, too, to really kind of drive the industry when it comes to having a even a career pathway for new professionals and also craft workers coming into the industry. And technology, I think that's also too a big driver with a lot of standards we have as over the years, as we've seen standards to really improve. They really have drastically impacted how inspections are done, how work is performed, and then also too, what are criteria to qualify it. In my capacity, I work in and around specifications, work with a lot of the engineering contacts out there to really kind of inform, educate, and also enlighten them on what's available out there. But what I really find is that everything really works together and comes together to make sure that not only projects are done successfully when it comes to the coding application, but even really kind of planning out the performance based on fit the purpose, what needs to be brought to bear based on what asset or what an owner or in a particular environmental zone or condition might need to achieve it. And, when we look at standards, you have a couple of things. You have international standards, and sometimes you will have organizations that will have what we would call guidelines that are kind of standards. And so there are organizations and bodies out there, when you think of international standards or certain things that you have to follow, what comes to mind is like ISO, but you have ANSI standards where you follow a certain format. The one thing that is very difficult to sometimes explain to someone who's thinking of getting into standards is, how does consensus process work? In your opinion, how does consensus be achieved with committees?
Well, I think, the most important aspect of consensus is making sure all of the stakeholders have a voice. And then, during the consensus process, those competing voices on different sides of the issue within the document all need to kind of come together, make compromises to make sure what ends up in the document is in everyone's best interest and balanced interest. But if we're missing some of the stakeholders in the process, that causes conflicts when people go to use those documents, in real projects. So that's one of the real key reasons that we need active participation from as many people as are able to participate, so that we get all those stakeholders, all those competing voices at the table.
I like that. You're going to get the owner, you're going to get people that work directly in the industry, you're going to get people who might support the industry in indirect ways. The other thing is you have academic, where you might have some academic interests involved in that. And really, you're bringing all those stakeholders, as you mentioned, you're working to achieve a consensus. So if you think about it, everyone who's on a committee, they might say it or not, they kind of have their own agendas. And so they're bringing what they want to see carved into, not really carved, but baked into this particular standard. A part of the consensus process is that you will present, what needs to be into the standard. And the other thing too, I did not mention earlier, that the best type of standards are standards that are needed, that don't already exist, because the one thing you don't want to have is competing and duplication, because that can create finger pointing as to, well, this says this says that, which one? Right. So, that's an important aspect of it. So I guess my next question for you is that, once you have that committee, you've got all the different stakeholders, they're trying to bake that standard, they're putting in their ingredients in there. What typically happens to get closer, and each time you're getting it down to where you actually have that solid consensus and a final vote and it's approved? What typically goes in debate and everything like that?
Sure. Yeah. So, depending on the organization, the processes are tweaked a little bit, but the basic process is there's a team or else sometimes an individual who write the initial draft of the document. And then that gets circulated in a ballot to the consensus body made up of voting members. And then those voting members have typically an opportunity. Again, the process is tweaked a little bit depending on the organization, but basically you're going to vote, yes, this is a good document, it's ready to go. You can say, yes, it's a good document, but here are a couple of comments. Maybe there's some issues with punctuation that should be addressed, or, the wording could be tweaked a little here, but overall it's good. You can vote, no, this is on the wrong track altogether. Here are my specific concerns, and those need to be outlined with very detailed references so that a debate can be organized and handled. That debate may be within a task group, it may be within the entire consensus body. But kind of as things get more and more polished, it gets to the point where it gets balloted to the entire consensus body. And then there has to be a high percentage of responses to the ballot. And sometimes in SDOs, it's SDOs, it's Standard Development Organizations, sorry. It's not uncommon that ballots will fail just because there wasn't enough people voting. And, so it's important that we get input, but, you got to vote on those ballots to let them move forward, because you got to have a certain percentage of the consensus body that participates in the process by voting. And then you have to have everyone's comments have to be resolved. So all those people who voted no and listed their concerns, all those people who voted yes but made a comment about, yeah, it's overall good, but it's not quite there. All of those comments have to be adjudicated. So, someone needs to reach out by email or by phone, talk about, what the concern was, how it's going to be resolved. Occasionally you just can't address every comment, and you can find some comments that are not persuasive by the group, and then those have to be seriously considered, and there has to be a reason that they were found non-compelling. But as with everything, you're not going to make everyone perfectly happy. So a few of the comments might hang out there as non-persuasive, but overall, in the end, you've got, the vast majority of the consensus body who has participated in the process and has agreed that this is a good document, it's ready for publication. Then a lot of organizations have one final step where there's like a stamp of approval. In AMP, that's the Standards Program Committee. And what the Standards Program Committee looks at is just to make sure that process was followed, that all of those comments were actually addressed. It's, we make sure that no one's input was ignored throughout the process, that all of those percentages of, the percentage responding and the percentage positive votes are all meeting the requirements. And then we give it the stamp of approval and it goes on to be published.
Oh, very good. It's such a lengthy process involved, but ultimately a very good product, hopefully will come out in the end. And to your point, you're addressing comments and addressing those as well, clarifying any questions there might be. Now, put things in perspective about voting. You have different, as you mentioned, standard development organizations like AMP, for example, and you have other type of organizations. When you look at an international standards, like with ISO, you have one, a country gets one vote. So that's it. Where you might have on some other standards development committees, you're going to have different types of representation. Each individual that is a voting member who has that ability to vote on it. But then also too, some organizations have others who will be participating, but they might not vote on it, but they're kind of participating. And again, that does help ultimately get, because really what you were trying to do, the aim of it is to produce a document that will provide a guideline, and it has the characteristics that can be practical and technical content and a mix thereof. And the other aspect of it is when you're looking at, if I remember correctly, with ANSI for standard development, every 5 years is usually a cycle when it comes to having a consensus standard reviewed and reaffirmed or modified and changed and reissued. Now, part of that modification that means that it gets basically grandfathered, or it gets nullified, and then maybe a different standard might arise from it. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, and that's an important piece. That 5-year review cycle is, it ensures that the content of standards don't get stale. So there's kind of a sunset period that with it every 5 years, it's got to be reviewed, and either it can be as simple as, hey, yeah, this is all still good. We reapprove this, and the consensus body votes on that again. And hopefully all the stakeholders are at the table and looking through that and able to, confirm that, yeah, this is still relevant information. It's up to date. The references are still good. There's this is still important to industry. Now, sometimes there's things that are important historically, but it's, maybe not something that's still relevant in industry today. And, some of those can be stabilized. There's different options depending on how the organizations handle things. But there's a lot that goes into it. And, there's a lot of different levels of participation. Those chairs of those committees are responsible to, make sure their documents get reviewed within that 5-year period. They're responsible to look for, new needs within their area of interest. They're responsible to balance the interests on their committee. So that's something that we didn't talk about yet. I don't know if that's on your list of questions, if I'm jumping ahead, Jim.
No, feel free if you want to cover it. Yeah, feel free while we're in the moment now.
I think it's important to note that, part of that ANSI accredited standards process is that you maintain balance between interests on the committees. So, different organizations may define those interests differently, but they may be something like user, end user, producer, what's the other one? I just drew a complete blank on the other one.
Would you have like a supplier, manufacturer,
yeah, supplier, end user, and
I know owners typically can get involved.
Let's go with that. And then the owner. So, that you want to have not all end users on the committee who are maybe, they care about a certain interest, but the owners may have a competing interest in that document. So you got to maintain a balance of the different interests on the committee. And so where I was going with it, the chairs have a lot of responsibility. And then there's also project teams that develop the documents, that write those initial drafts. Maybe it's one person, maybe it's a small team of people. That's another, kind of more heavy involvement. But there are also a lot of positions that are just as important in the consensus process that are much less time consuming. If you're just a voting member of a committee, you have to review a few documents depending on the size of the committee and the load of their documents. It often is, not very time consuming. And, there are ways typically within different organizations handle it differently, but you can return a ballot saying, this isn't in my area of expertise, so I'm going to just pass on this one. And then that helps with the necessary response rate on the ballot. So it shows that you've looked at it, you've said, hey, this isn't what I know about. I can't really make a useful comment here. So, a lot of times, you're not putting a huge amount of time in to participate, and you're, really protecting your own personal professional interests by participating in the process and weighing in on those standards that are going to impact your day-to-day work.
So for my experience working at Legacy SSPC, what I typically saw as a timeline when you were looking at organization coming up with a standard, it could take typically about a 2, maybe 3 year period from start to finish. Sorry, we just had a tornado warning here, and
Oh
some
no.
storm is blowing through. So I'm hopefully, give me 1 second. Let me shut a window
Yeah.
here.
Yep. For sure. Want to make sure everything's safe. Just a brief pause. Feel some obligation to have some form of entertainment here, but I'm the wrong person for that.
Dedication to Coatings Talk. Sorry about that. I just wanted to shut a window. I think we're going to be okay because it doesn't look too bad out there. Just the wind's kind of blowing up right now. What I was going to say, what I was talking about was that, typically you have a standard within an organization could take 2 or 3 years. Now, joint standards with other organizations, that could be a 3 to 5 year process to be able to get approved. And so for you, what you were mentioning about involvement in time, a lot of it might be, you're doing this here, you're doing this then. It's never like, okay, we got to get this banged out in 1 month. It typically never goes that way.
Yeah, no,
right?
no. From what I understand, kind of best in class standards developing organizations might be able to produce a document in 12 to 18 months, but many of the organizations that produce standards take 3 to 5 years to get a document fully through the balloting process and ready for publication. So it's a long process. So, you're spending, a few hours here, a few hours there over the course of, 18 months to 3 to 5 years. So it's not like it's eating up your work week.
Correct.
Because you have to jam something through. And typically, kind of on that time frame as well, when ballots come out, you typically have a month to review the ballot material and then make your comments and return your ballot. So it's, again, not like you have to interrupt your daily work. I'm a little worried that we lost Jim. The live counter is still going, but Jim looks frozen. So I'm worried that this tornado that he's experiencing may be more of a disruption than he expected. Oh, and now we have lost Jim altogether. So yeah, I my big soapbox, I guess, that I've been on for standards development committees, you can participate actively at a level that works with your schedule. Now, not every single person can squeeze in time to participate on committees or to participate on multiple committees, for sure. But whenever you can, it's just such a great way to build your professional network, to develop some skills that you might not have access to in your daily work. Some of that building consensus with different types of stakeholders and building relationships with different types of stakeholders who are working in the same topics, the same industry that you're working in. It's been such a valuable part of my career. And I would love to see everybody take advantage of that opportunity that's out there for them. And how many of us have used a document, be it a test method or a standard of some type, and read through it and just thought, I don't know where these people were going with this. Some of this is just confusing the way it's written, or, and being part of the process, you get to see kind of those inner workings and that debate that kind of results in some of those standards that, we've all seen them, we've all used them. There's some, most standards that go through the consensus process end up, pretty well polished and pretty good at the end. But we've all had those where we're like, what's happening here? And, if you've had that frustration, being part of the process is the best way to work around that.
Sarah, you were able to carry on?
I did carry on as best I could. You'll have to look through and see what I came up with.
The power went off on me, but luckily everything kind of rebooted back up, and I'm back on the FiOS now. Thank you for carrying on. I appreciate that. Hopefully I won't disconnect again, but we'll see what happens. Now, what I wanted to go through next is talk about when you're looking at joining a committee. Typically there's some steps involved, and what I'd like to do is to feel free to add any type of comment on it, especially with your background, experience, and expertise. And plus, the role really, I think that what we're focusing on right now is trying to get people to sign up for these different committees and things like that. So it's an opportunity for us here. The first thing is identifying a committee. And really, when you're looking at identifying a committee to join in on, you want to find something that really aligns with your expertise, your interest. Maybe it's your professional objectives and goals. It might be associated with the company that you do work with their interests as well. And it could be in any type of an area related to coatings or corrosion. You could also take an aspect of an engineering type of a position, or environmental position, or whatever it might be that you're looking to do, safety position and things like that. How would you advise someone who's thinking about committees, how they can identify committees that make sense for them to maybe consider to join?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of different approaches that can be pretty important. One is, which I think in my view is the best way to go about it, is to look at not only the description of the committees, because sometimes those descriptions can be a little vague, but look at the list of documents that committee governs. So you can see that on the AMP website. You can see that on the ASTM website as well. You can see which committee actually works on those standards. So I would say most of us in our daily work in coatings and corrosion are dealing with standards. So, some of those standards that are most important to your work, start with that and look at what committees govern those standards. And then consider joining those. Or maybe there's something that you're hoping to get more involved in. You have a knowledge base, because that's going to be important. But maybe it's not something that you do in your daily work, and it's something that you want to get more involved in. Getting involved, particularly as an observer in that standards committee, you can really get a lot of valuable information that way, and then progress your way in to a voting membership position once you've kind of established a little bit better credentials in that topic. But that's a great way to get introduced to the experts in a field, particularly if you're looking to partner with some people to cover gaps that you have. Being an observer on some of those committees is a quick way to learn, especially when one of those standards that you use is under revision. That's a great way to get connected with people and get involved. And when you're an observer on a committee, you really don't have much responsibility at all. You can typically, most organizations will allow you to comment on documents, but they aren't depending on your vote to meet those participation requirements and that kind of stuff. So you can still be part of the process and a valuable part of the discussion with, no real skin in the game.
That's very good advice on there and recommendations. the next part or the next step that I've identified is, really reviewing you've identified, let's say, a committee or two that you have interest in. You want to review the requirements. Each committee has typically its own set of requirements for members. Some organizations you have to be a participating, basically a paid member, have some skin in the game, let's say. But you might need to have a certain level of industry expertise, technical knowledge, and a certain particular type of a professional background. When it comes to the coatings industry, which you've served on many committees, typically what are some of the requirements, bare minimum, that a person looking to join a committee typically would need to have?
A lot of cases, it's as simple as paying the membership fee and joining as a member to join a committee. Now, AMP doesn't require committee members to have a paid AMP membership. So, as far as AMP committees, really anyone can participate. Now, to be a voting member, you have to be approved by the committee chair. So they may look a little bit at your background and look for at least some experience and some proof that you have knowledge before they accept you as a voting member to their committee. But you can join pretty much any committee as an observer, and there's really no barrier to entry there as far as AMP. I'm also very familiar with ASTM, and it's not a large fee to join as an active member, and then you get, in return for being an active member of ASTM, you get a volume of standards for free. So really, if you're using the ASTM standards, it more than pays for your membership to just get those updated standards for free. So, there's very little barrier to entry. I know some other committees that I've participated on, like I believe with the Research Council. I guess I shouldn't name it since I'm not 100% sure. But as I recall, I had to apply to be on that committee and send my resume so that they could see what my background was and why I was interested in joining their committee, and make sure that they're getting people with a strong knowledge base. So it kind of depends organization to organization, but in a lot of places, you can just dive right in.
Yeah, you actually covered step 3 and 4, where you're making an application. In some cases, you either petition, or you say, "Hey, I want to join." I guess you could call that a petition, or you actually submit formal documentation for it to be reviewed, to be qualified. To your point, you could serve on a lot of different committees. Maybe you're active, but you're not an active voting member of it, based on, again, your background, irregardless of membership within an organization. But once you do submit your application, in some of these organizations, you're going to kind of wait for approval for it, and then at that point, then you're looking to join a committee and participating. The last step that I had, which I think is one that we want to focus on as we're ending this broadcast, is to participate actively. You really, once you've gone through that process of identifying, applying, you're now in a committee, let's say you're a voting member of a committee, you need to actively be volunteering. And as we mentioned earlier, there typically standards can take time to really kind of go through the consensus process, get approved, and be put out there in the industry. And then they're periodically reviewed, either to reaffirm them or to modify them, update them per se, let's say that, or to retire them and come out with new versions of standard or standards with that. What advice do you have to people about actively volunteering?
Yeah, so I think the key is return your ballots if you're a voting member. So if you're an observer, I think it's important, read through the documents that are within your area of expertise. If you're an observer on the committee, there was a reason at some point that you applied to get on the committee and joined the committee. So not every document will pertain to you, and ignore the ones that don't pertain to you. That's perfectly acceptable. But there are going to be a set of documents that do pertain to your work and pertain to your expertise. Read those documents, give your feedback, make sure that all the different stakeholders have a voice in the process, and your unique voice is going to cover a subset of those stakeholders. So participate by reading the document, submitting your comments. Some documents you'll read through and they look good to you. So, if you're an observer, there's nothing you need to do. If you're a voting member, make sure to return that ballot and vote yes, and push that document through. And I think the other key for active members, comment appropriately. Don't vote negative on a standard because you don't like the verbiage. It might be technically correct, but it doesn't really sit well with you. Let it go. You got to build a consensus amongst all the stakeholders. So if it's not a serious concern, or sometimes the wording doesn't sit with you because it's confusing, and then certainly voice that. But if it's just, something you don't really personally like, it's a word you don't like to use or whatever, let it go. But submit those comments that are relevant, that are pertinent. Make sure to be explicit with your comments. Point out what you don't like, and then propose a solution. A lot of SDOs will require in your ballot that when you vote no and make a comment about a specific issue, you do suggest a change. What would satisfy you? So raising an issue without suggesting a resolution to that issue sometimes just causes a lot of extra work, a lot of extra stirring around. Whoever the team is that's in charge of that standard project is going to come back to you anyway and ask you if what you propose, if you're satisfied with what they're proposing. So you're going to have to think on that side anyway. So you might as well, do the work to do it up front. Sometimes you might not have a solution. And if you don't have one, that's okay. It's still, if you have a serious concern with, for sure a technical aspect, or, you think sometimes the hardest thing to find a resolution to is when something's confusing or contradictory, so don't hesitate don't stop raising the concerns if you don't have a solution, but try your best to come up with a solution, because someone's going to need to.
Yeah, that's a very good point there. And when you're looking at different type of organizations, for me, my experience would be obviously, AMP would be an organization that does standards. You have NSF, you have IACET, which deals with the International Association for Continuing Education and Training, the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, ASME, and there's so many other type of standards organizations. So what I always say to people, look to get actively involved in these committees, and make sure that these standards are being built, to your point, consensus, but they're strong. They could stand the test of time. And think about how this is for your professional resume with your current employer, or if you're looking to change into a different company. If you have this on your resume showing that you actively are involved in standards organizations to better whatever industry you're working in, I think it really goes to show your passion for the industry and the work that you do. And also too, remember that active participation in these committees not only contributes to the development of standards, but it also provides you a platform for your professional growth and networking, because you're learning a lot more from being on these committees than not being on the committees. Even if you're observing, if you're a voting member, then you're deep into the thick of everything. But even as an observer, you're doing that. But also too, you're networking with so many different, maybe engineers, owner contacts, suppliers. You've got different people. And then from that, you're expanding it out as you participate with other type of committees or other parts of an organization. That networking, professional networking, is so powerful these days and so important. What anything that you'd like to add that maybe I didn't cover about participating on these committees in an active way?
Yeah, no, what you were just talking about, that building your network, that's the biggest value that you get out of participating in these committees, because the committees are balanced. So all the different stakeholders in a topic are at the table. So you have a great audience with maybe that next customer you're looking for, or maybe someone who's going to refer you to the next customer who sits on a different aspect of the industry than you're working in. And typically we kind of work in our silos, right? The manufacturers know the other manufacturers, the engineers talk to the other engineers, the inspection staff talks to the other inspectors, and we mix a little bit. But this is just such a great way to showcase your knowledge, showcase your passion for the industry, for those other people, those teaming partners you're going to need, the manufacturer you're going to rely on to give you, the best advice, the next owner that you're trying to provide a service for, or as an owner, it's going to help you understand which suppliers, which consultants are actively involved and have the deepest understanding of the issue that you're trying to deal with. So it's just, in my mind, the most valuable networking you could have professionally.
Yeah, perfect. And one thing I'll leave with everyone, and if for those on LinkedIn, this morning when I released the Coatings Talk Insight newsletter, well over 3,000 subscribers. So if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Today's topic was related to standards committees, so you can learn a lot more from that post that I did, that newsletter it released today. And then I guess in kind of closing things out, Sarah, how can people follow you, maybe get in contact with you? Is it LinkedIn, social media, or how can they kind of connect with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's the best way. I'm really active on LinkedIn. I'm on there every day. So, you can find me, Sarah Olthof, on LinkedIn, and I, reach out, follow me, send me a connection request. I'll be glad to continue conversations, and I try to repost and share a lot of things that I find interesting. A lot of Jim's stuff. It's great stuff. I read through his newsletter today. There's a lot of great standards tidbits in there. So check it out.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and definitely check it out. Thank you, Sarah, very much. Everyone, thank you for this storm interrupted. I'm okay. Everything's all right. It's a little dark out and windy right now. And, when you get your phone, 5 minutes into our conversation, it's saying tornado alert. And I don't have a storm cellar where I live at. And I'm at the highest point in the Allegheny County here in Pittsburgh. So we get some nasty wind, but I think the worst of it passed over. So I appreciate the interruption, Sarah. I appreciate you carrying on the Coatings Talk. And for everyone, thank you so much. I really appreciate your support and continued support. And I look forward to continuing this Coatings Talk with everyone. Thank you so much, Sarah. Have a good rest of your evening. And everyone, have a good rest of your evening. Good morning and good afternoon, no matter where in the world you're watching this live broadcast. Goodbye, everybody.